before I get to your new book, I want
Yeah.
to ask you about fatness,
Sure.
right? And what is your opinion on fatness? What do you think about it?
So I
Because I noticed that people are trying to push fatness like it's a nice thing, right?
Uh-huh.
You got all these fat women running around half naked and showing their fat butts and shit.
Yeah. So where's that? I haven't seen that spot.
There's one black rapper right now, woman.
A Lizzo?
Yeah, she is gross and she's old and she's fat. And
No, that must not be the
the
person
rapper.
we're
Is it
talking
Lizzo?
about. No.
Yeah, Lizzo.
She's not
She was
old.
at a fat
If
ball.
Lizzo's
Fat ball.
old, then I'm ancient, and let's not even start.
I'm anxious. God made me and then he made dirt for me to walk on. But that's how old I am. But what do
Lizzo is
you
pretty gorgeous, in my opinion. But
what do you think about fatness?
so
What's your
yeah,
opinion?
so I mean, I published this book in 2013, What's Wrong with Fat? And what I was trying to answer in this question was, how is it that we have come to believe in this world, and your statements are a great example of this. How have we become so certain that it's unhealthy, it's undesirable, it's ugly? Like, where is that coming from, and what are the social implications of that? And what are some other ways to understand bigger bodies? So, the dominant way we talk about fatness, and we don't usually use the term, I do in that work.
Right.
Most people will talk about obesity, they'll talk about overweight, and even using those terms, right, you're already implying this is a medical problem, this is unhealthy. Call in the doctors, send out the public health warnings. But actually, when you go and start looking at the research, you find a few things. First of all, it became socially undesirable to be heavy before it was considered a medical problem. And so it's an interesting case in which people's social preferences and biases came before the medicine. It was in really the turn of the 20th century why was it happening? Well, in many places around the world, and also in previous times in the US, it was considered desirable and beautiful to be heavy. Why? Because there wasn't enough food to go around. And so if you had a little extra weight on you, that meant you weren't starving, and you were healthier than those people who
and you would
were.
get less food at the table.
And it was a sign of wealth. No, I mean, the wealthy hoard the resources. And but then this starts to shift in the early 20th century. And as it does, and as being heavy is no longer a sign of wealth, it also becomes no longer socially desirable. And it's later, it's not until the mid-50s that doctors start saying this is a medical problem. And it's even later into the 90s that public health officials start talking about this as an epidemic, the raising rates of people of heavier weights.
So you don't believe that fatness can be a health problem?
So that's not my argument. I think that in some cases, higher weight is associated with
High
increased
blood
risk.
pressure and all kinds of
but
stuff.
it's association, and in science we say always be careful. And association does not necessarily mean causation. Association and causation are not the same thing. So for instance, type 2 diabetes, that's a case where the association is very strong. Higher weight, and it's linear. So like from even the lowest weights, as weight goes higher,
right,
your risk of type 2 diabetes, the associated risk is higher. But we don't really know the causation. It might be that higher weight causes type 2 diabetes, but it might also be that insulin resistance, which is related to type 2 diabetes, causes weight gain, or that some third factor, like bad diet, lack of exercise, causes both.
So let me ask, I'm black and I'm slow, so I may ask in a weird way. Are you trying to prove that fatness doesn't cause diseases and death, or it's not? It doesn't cause high blood pressure and all that stuff?
I'll leave to the epidemiologists and the medical doctors to debate that out.
Oh,
but what I do
show... Are you trying to prove that it's attractive or something?
No, what I show is that there's different ways of understanding, or sociologists talk about framing. There's different ways to frame an issue or to present an issue.
Right.
And I show that the medical and public health crisis issue has become dominant in part because of the negative stereotypes and social implications of being heavier. In part because today in the US and in other wealthy nations, those who are heavier also tend to be poorer, tend to be people of color, and the elites are the ones who tend to be thinner, and that's also a way that they can distinguish themselves from others. And
Is it because they eat better, the ones that with the money, as opposed to one that doesn't?
you know, there's lots of reasons that explain why the wealthier are thinner. Yes, part of it is that they have access to, you know, the fruits and vegetables, et cetera. They have access to gyms. They have more time. They're not working 3 jobs.
Right.
Being poor and working multiple jobs is very stressful. That stress causes cortisol levels to increase, which leads to weight gain. Being discriminated against also raises stress and cortisol level, which causes more weight gain. And in fact, one of the things I show in the book is all of this anti-fat bias that we heap on people because they're heavier,
Right.
and we tell them you're ugly and you shouldn't, and you shouldn't be going out. Like that actually has been shown to make people heavier, not thinner. And they're also less likely to get to the doctor. And when they do get to the doctor, they're less likely to get adequate medical care because the doctors share these biases and they look at heavier people. And I've heard this especially from women. They go to the doctor, they have a sore throat, they have a sore knee, and the doctor says, well, you know why you're experiencing this. It doesn't matter what it is. You know why. It's because of your weight. Go lose some weight and come back.
So should fat people hold on to the fat, or should they get rid of it?
Believe me, anyone who's fat, if you have a conversation with anyone who is fat,
Right.
ask them about, maybe you don't want to ask them. I'll just tell you, they've tried.
Right.
And typically they've been on more diets than you or
I've
I
heard
have
that.
been on.
Yeah.
And they do lose weight short term. But you know what happens for about 90% of people who lose weight on a diet?
They get it back.
They gain back and then some.
Yeah.
And so telling them to lose weight or telling them that they're not okay the way they are
So what should
isn't
you tell
gonna
them,
help.
that they are okay, or
I think you just...
or you should be like, you know what? I don't mean any
I don't
harm, but you should get rid of that fat.
Well, I don't think that's going to be very helpful because they've already tried.
But can't you
They
be
already
nice
know.
about the way you say it?
I think you try. My philosophy in life is try to be nice to everybody. Kindness. I think that's a really great thing.
Would you want to be fat, you personally?
Would I want to be fat? Would I want to take on discrimination and be mistreated in society? No.
So you're saying that being fat, people are discriminated against them, right?
There's a lot of
And that put on stress
discrimination.
for the fat person, and they get fatter.
There's a lot of evidence that is what happens.
So now
yes.
that white people, especially white men, are being discriminated against, should we expect to see a lot of fat white men?
What, fat white men are being discriminated against, really?
Should we be able to
This
see a
is
lot
a
of
news
fat
flash?
white men? So what is fatphobia? What is that?
So,
You
and
write about that,
this actually starts to link into my new book a little bit.
Yeah.
Come out, whoever you are.
Right.
Because this term fatphobia is borrowed from, it's inspired by another word. Can you guess what term? Fatphobia. There's another kind of phobia we talk about a lot.
White supremacists.
White supremacy is a real problem, but a word that has phobia in it.
White phobia.
Homophobia.
Oh, that's
So-
where fat phobia came from?
I believe so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And one of the things that I found really surprising when I started doing research at the fat acceptance movement in the year 2000. Can
Fat
you believe
acceptance?
I went to the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, was holding a conference in Cherry Hill, New Jersey in the summer of 2000. I happened at the time to have my stomach out to here because I was pregnant. I was like
Right.
7 months pregnant. And I thought maybe that would help me blend in.
Right.
That was completely silly because people can tell the difference
Right.
between fat and pregnant.
Yeah.
But I was a little nervous going there, as a thinner woman. Would I be welcome? Would I be able to talk to people? People were incredibly welcoming and very happy to talk about their experiences. And I was very surprised when I started asking people, how did you get involved in the fat acceptance movement? People said to me, let me tell you about when I came out as fat. And I thought, what does it mean to come out as
Right.
fat?
You're fat. I can
Right,
already see it.
what does it mean? Right. And so then that was the beginning of what ended up becoming this book, because I realized that this term coming out was being harnessed and used in all sorts of different contexts to resist stigma, to organize for social change. And I'm coming back to fat phobia, because this term fat phobia also is clearly inspired by the term homophobia. And in both talking about coming out as fat and talking about homophobia, the fat acceptance movement has really taken inspiration from the gay rights movement and the LGBTQ plus movement, and has, by using the similar terminology, is saying, this is like, being fat is like being gay.
Amazing.
We're discriminated against, but also, you've been asking me questions that kind of assume like it's a choice. Would I want to be fat? Why do people, can you tell people not? But there's actually, and this is not my research, but there are geneticists who have shown that body size is just as determined by genetics as is height. And we know if you don't get proper nutrition, you won't grow to your full potential in terms of height. Likewise with weight, what's available and how much food is available will affect, but there is a strong genetic component.
So fat phobia means to fear fat people?
It's a term that's used, as with homophobia, to convey fear, but also hatred as well of fat
But mostly
people.
to fear fat people,
The
right?
term
That's what phobia means. Yeah.
but I think that actually in common parlance, when people use homophobia and they use fat phobia, they're talking as much about hatred and bigotry as they are about the fear itself.
So are human beings taught fat phobia, or is that something that we naturally develop? Is to not like fat people, not like a person that's fat.
Yeah, so
I would never date a fat woman, right? So does
you
that
would
mean,
never date a fat woman, as
right?
you said. Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that I'm fat phobia, or it's just I'm not attracted to that?
So it can be a mix of both. I think that in getting back to your issue of,
are we taught that,
of what we're taught, this is getting back to your very first question in terms of what's sociology. So one of the things that sociologists look for when we're trying to figure out, is this socially produced or does it have other origins in genes or in evolution, is we look for variation. And you can definitely, actually in most places over history and still today in the world, it's not just talking, viewing from maybe a heteronormative frame for a second, the women who are considered desirable are not the skinny ones. They're the heavy ones.
In what world is that?
Most places.
Like
most
where?
Places over society. Well, in
like over across the sea?
Today, many places across a lot of places where food is not so abundant as it is today in the U.S. But if you were to do a survey of societies over time across the world, in most places, the fact that what's really strange are the women who are considered desirable. If you open up a fashion magazine, super skinny,
right,
incredibly tall, almost impossible. In terms, so that really does require an explanation.
So what you guys are trying to do, if I'm hearing this correctly, you're trying to convince society to accept fat as a norm, not look at them and think, wow, that's a fat one, right? You're trying to cause society to see an abnorm as a norm? So
my project in the book, What's Wrong with Fat, the 2013 book, was to look at what are the different ways that it's understood. And one of the, and a couple, so that we talked about the public health crisis frame, the medical frame, the organization I went to, NAFA, the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, is advancing two alternative frames, I would argue. One is one I call a beauty frame, or fat is beautiful, reclaiming that. So reclaiming like the Rubens paintings and recognizing that Rubens painted beautiful women. They were all heavy, and one of them is on the cover of that 2013 book.
Right.
There are also public health or clinicians who have been arguing for an approach of health at every size. And so this would be more about, let's not focus on the weight, so they care a lot about health.
But you can't help but see what you see.
You know,
And then fat people are sick, they're a burden to the family, they're high medical costs. When I remember a time in America, especially in the black community, black women were getting really fat at some point. And they said it's not healthy because heart attacks and things like that. And it came from eating the wrong type of meats and things like that. So they told the black people, you better cut back. And so blacks started to cut back, and they were living longer, getting better. And then after the civil rights movement, they said, all right, black people, eat what you want, get as fat as you want, we'll make it beautiful. And now they're dying out. Which is best, to guide them in the right way, or let's let them be fat? Like that woman that I was telling you about, the rapper woman.
Lizzo.
Yeah, she's gross. She was at a basketball game showing her nasty fat butt, and she's old. It's like they're losing control.
So I don't know if we're looking at the same Lizzo, because I mean, the one I've seen is pretty gorgeous and pretty young. But I think.
But isn't it best to be honest with them rather than
well,
try
I
to?
think we should be honest about what we know and what we don't know, and we don't know how to make fat people thin, and so telling them they should become thin.
I used to be fat.
Is not.
I got so fat I didn't recognize. I was interviewed in a hometown newspaper, and it says "hometown boy make it big." Right? I went home, and they were making a big deal of it, and they took a picture of me. And the next morning I looked in the paper and I saw that picture. I did not recognize me myself, and I'm like, yeah, I made it big, all right, but I made a decision in that very moment. I'm gonna get rid of the fat, and I got rid of it. Why don't we demand that? That's how all people do.
Things have worked out in a positive way for you, and that's wonderful. But most of the time, if we tell people that they need to lose weight, what's going to happen is they will lose weight temporarily and gain it back, and that's not helpful. But I want to go back to what you were saying earlier, because we do know of some things that will improve your health, and they often get lumped with weight, but they don't have to be. And so that is getting back to the health at every size. That's exactly what Health at Every Size movement tries to do. So we know that certain foods are better. It's good for most people. There's variations on what you should be eating based on your own susceptibilities, et cetera. But for most people, eating more fruits and vegetables, eating less processed food is going to be better for them. So we can encourage drinking a lot of water, not drinking sodas. You can certainly make that easier and encourage people to do it in a way that is empowering and not judgmental. Exercise is incredibly health promoting for everybody. And
do you exercise?
I exercise a lot.
And are you careful with what you eat?
I do.
Right
I
on.
am. Yeah.
And so look how you look. But suppose you were sitting there pinking out on everything, you'll take up that whole seat.
Well, what I was going to say earlier is that there are a lot of people who can eat well, exercise, do everything right, and they're still going to be fat. Now, all of their panels are going to be great. The exercise and the eating well is going to have excellent impact on their blood pressure, on their cholesterol levels, on everything. They're going to be in great health. And we should encourage them to continue, and not, what does happen today is someone is out on biking, a very heavy woman biking, out in public or at the gym doing everything right, and someone says, fat ass, that. And then that person's like, I don't want to go out anymore. I don't want to exercise, right? So that kind of negative assessment of people is just not helpful. It's not helpful.
I was at the gym the other day, and I was on the steps, and I saw a fat Mexican on the treadmill thing, and he was like really fat. He had fat hanging all down everywhere. And I was thinking, I wonder how you get that fat. And I wanted to ask him, is that judgmental?
Well, it's making a judgment.
But not judgmental, right?
It's probably, people would say it's judgmental, but
but I didn't hate him for it. I just know, like,
and these are things we do. We're making judgments all the time.
Everybody does that.
We do it, and I'm not one to kind of throw stones from glass houses.
Right
I think what I try to do in my work, and writing this work and doing the work that I do is also educates me.
Absolutely.
I learn about a population that isn't mine. I mean, that's one of the things that's interesting about this book, and it's a double-edged sword. But I write about lots of different groups and how they come out, and I'm not really a member of any of them, right? And so
you don't look like anything you write about. Or anyone you write about. You look better than what you write about. And so I'm
or
wondering, why
not
don't
as
you
not as
offer
well.
why don't you offer what you're doing rather than trying to encourage them to accept it?
I'm not a self-help writer, and I'm not writing. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to understand, as a sociologist, how the world
Oh, I
works
see.
and how we reproduce systems of inequality, but also how people are able to gain control and resist and find freedom and
I got you.
liberation. And I think that this, the coming out, the way people have done this, and I find the fat acceptance movement really inspirational.
How do are we? And give me a yes or no on this. Are we taught to discriminate against fat people, or is it something natural?
Yes,
that
we learn.
we learn. So I remember, and the reason I asked because when I read this, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I went to the first grade when I was 6 years old, right? In my days, you didn't go to school until you were 6. And in that classroom was a fat girl, black girl, that tried to like me. And she was trying to really hit on me. And I'm like, oh, get away, you fat pig. I don't like fat girls. Was I taught that? Because I had never heard that there was anything wrong with being fat or not being wrong, wrong with it. But I knew I didn't like fat girls. It just didn't look right. Right. Was I taught that, or did I naturally know that I didn't like fat?
I probably have to, go back in time and talk to you and
No, I had never heard any discrimination.
But I think,
And she was trying to she was going from guy to try to get a boyfriend in the first grade.
yeah. Well, so there might have been other things about her that you didn't like, as well as
It was mostly fat.
Yeah.
Because she was kind of cute. You know, fat girls are kind of cute, but
Well, I mean, a lot of people do like heavier, fat girls, etc.
right there, I see it more
but
now.
But I mean, if you look in terms of what images are we shown, even if you hadn't been to school, maybe you would have seen TV.
No, we didn't have TVs yet. I grew up before they even invented TV.
Yeah, and
right?
what about the people in your
Let me tell you why that was that way. When I was growing up, I grew up on a plantation in Alabama, and during that time, black people were not fat for the most part. They had great bodies, the men and the women. And so I wasn't accustomed to seeing fat people.
So it was different.
Yeah. And they lived longer, they were healthier, they didn't have all that anger and stuff going on. And so they looked better, they act
certainly,
better.
we're not going to argue that the plantation is a healthy way to live, right?
Oh, yes, it is. You know why?
Why?
Because we plant all our food for the most part. We ate right from the earth rather than going to the stores and all that. But the point I want to make is that there were no fat people around for the most part. They were most healthy blacks. And they looked great, the girls. So all the girls that I was attracted to were, they had great bodies. They weren't all fat. But my point was I fat phobia because I wasn't attracted to that.
I mean,
My question is.
Yeah, I think there's maybe something, but again, this is kind of wandering a little bit outside of my area of expertise, but I think that there may be something where we mistrust or we don't like difference. And so if someone, this was a body type that you weren't used to seeing, then that, we can't argue that it's universal or natural, because there's plenty of places around the world, historically and still today, where girls, are fattened up for marriage. They're not considered marriageable unless they gain weight. And so, that wouldn't happen. It wouldn't make sense if preference for thin bodies were universal.